You might have seen, the headlines recently about Debbie Nelson passing, and she was Eminem's mom.
Yeah.
So we're going to be taking a deep dive today into her life.
Okay.
Beyond the headlines to really try to understand her story. A life that really intertwines with personal struggles, but also the unique experience of being the mother of a global icon.
Right.
And the main source we're going to be using for this deep dive is a blog post called Trend This.
Okay, cool.
So the blog post kind of starts by giving us this picture of Debbie's early life. She was born in 1955 on a U.S. Air Force base.
Yeah.
And, faced some challenges even from a young age.
Yeah.
And becoming a mother at just 18.
Wow.
You can already tell this wasn't an easy path for her.
No kidding.
But what really stuck out to me was how the blog post described her relationship with her son.
Oh, yeah.
Marshall Bruce Mathers III.
Yeah.
You know who we all know as Eminem.
Right.
They use the word tumultuous.
Mm.
What do you think about that description?
Well, tumultuous, I mean, when you consider how he used his music to, process their relationship,
All right.
it almost feels like an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about cleaning out my closet in some of those songs.
Right.
I mean, just raw anger. It's very public.
Yeah.
He's airing very personal grievances.
But that rawness is also what made him connect with so many listeners.
Right.
It felt authentic, even if it was tough to hear. But it wasn't just the music, though.
Right.
The blog post mentions that Debbie actually filed a defamation lawsuit against Eminem in 1999.
Oh, wow.
Which I have to admit kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
So the lawsuit claimed that his lyrics were damaging to her reputation.
Okay.
It's important to remember this is happening at the height of his fame.
Yeah.
So every word he's saying is being scrutinized.
Totally.
Unfortunately, though, the details are pretty limited because it was settled out of court.
Oh, okay.
We don't really know specifics.
Gotcha.
But the fact that it went that far is really telling about the level of conflict.
For sure. It's almost like their family drama was playing out on this public stage.
Yeah.
With lawyers in courtrooms instead of a therapist's office.
Right. You're not wrong. I mean, it's a reminder of how fame can complicate even the most personal relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this very public legal battle happening.
Yeah.
And then years later, Eminem releases Headlights in 2013, which seems to be an attempt at reconciliation.
It does. Yeah.
So how do we make sense of that shift?
Well, what's fascinating about Headlights is it demonstrates how relationships aren't static. Even when they're deeply fractured, they evolve and they shift. There's anger and hurt, sure, but also potentially, this hope for connection.
Okay.
He acknowledges her as his mother, despite his harsh words in the past.
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't always take things at face value.
Right.
Especially when it comes to celebrities.
For sure.
There's often more to the story than what we see.
Absolutely. We need to consider that a single song lyric or a soundbite in an interview doesn't capture the full complexity of a relationship.
Yeah.
There are layers upon layers.
Speaking of layers, the blog post also mentions Debbie's other son, Nathan.
Right.
Who goes by Nate.
Okay.
And his reaction to his mother's death was posted on social media.
Oh, wow.
He said hatred and mixed emotions today.
Hmm.
That phrase really stuck with me.
It does, yeah.
What do you think he meant by that?
Well, it speaks volumes about a relationship that was likely filled with both love and pain, resentment and possibly even forgiveness.
Yeah.
It's important to remember we're only seeing a tiny glimpse into their life through just one post.
It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle with only a few pieces.
Yeah.
And we're left to fill in the blanks.
Right. And it's a reminder that even within families, there are different perspectives.
Absolutely.
Different experiences.
Yeah.
What might seem clear-cut to one person can be incredibly nuanced for another.
Especially when you consider the added layer of growing up with a brother who's a global superstar.
Oh, yeah.
That has to impact family dynamics in ways most of us can't even imagine.
You make a great point. It'd be fascinating to get Nate's perspective on that.
Totally.
We often focus on the celebrity, but what about the siblings?
Right.
The people who share that same family history.
But experience it from a different vantage point.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to Debbie herself. The blog post paints a picture of her life that goes beyond just being Eminem's mom.
Yeah.
She had her own struggles.
Right.
A difficult childhood health issues.
Of course.
And this incredibly complex relationship with her sons.
Yeah.
Yet there were also moments where she expressed immense pride in Eminem's success.
I see.
The blog post specifically mentions her congratulating him publicly on his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2022.
Wow. Okay.
What do you make of that?
Well, it shows the complexities of their relationship, right? Even amidst conflict and strained ties, there can be moments of genuine pride and connection.
Totally.
It humanizes the situation, reminding us that even in the most challenging relationships, emotions aren't always black and white.
It's like we're starting to see a more complete picture of Debbie Nelson emerge.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that there's always more to the story
than what we initially see. And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We're going beyond the surface to try and understand the person behind the headlines.
And I think we're just getting started.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to uncover as we continue to explore her life. You know, it's fascinating to think about how Debbie Nelson's life might have been different had Eminem not become a global superstar.
Right.
Like, would their relationship have played out so publicly?
Yeah.
Would she have faced the same level of scrutiny?
It's a question that really lingers.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to separate her story from his trajectory.
It is.
She was thrust into this world of fame, whether she wanted it or not. And it makes me wonder, how do you navigate that as a parent?
Oh, yeah.
On the one hand, you have this immense pride in your child's success. But on the other hand, there's the potential for your own life to be overshadowed.
Right.
Your story becomes a footnote in someone else's narrative.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah.
And then you add the layer of his music,
right,
which often drew inspiration from their complicated relationship.
Yeah.
And suddenly her personal struggles are part of this much larger cultural conversation.
Right.
Millions of people are listening,
Yeah.
forming opinions, and maybe even projecting their own family dynamics onto their relationship.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
And amidst all of that, the blog post mentions that Debbie's facing all these personal challenges.
Yeah.
A difficult upbringing, the pressures of young motherhood,
Right.
and ongoing health issues.
Yeah.
It's a testament to her resilience.
It
To
does.
face those hardships and then to have them amplified by the spotlight on her son,
Absolutely.
it speaks to a strength of character. It does.
And it also makes Headlights even more poignant.
It does.
Knowing the backdrop of her life,
Yeah.
his apology and plea for reconciliation take on a whole new meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in families where there's been conflict, there can be this underlying current of love
Yeah.
and a yearning for understanding.
Yeah.
It's messy and complicated,
Totally.
but ultimately it's human.
And it keeps drawing me back to Nate's social media post.
Oh, yeah.
Hatred and mixed emotions today.
Right.
You know, we're trying to understand this mother-son relationship,
Mm,
but then there's this other son experiencing it all from a different perspective.
totally.
Do you think growing up with a brother like Eminem added another layer of complexity to his relationship with their mother?
It's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but it's certainly possible.
Right.
Imagine the pressure, the comparisons,
Yeah.
the feeling of maybe being in your brother's shadow.
Right.
It's not something most of us can relate to.
But it's something we need to acknowledge when trying to make sense of his reaction.
It's a reminder that every family member has their own story,
Yeah.
their own interpretation of events.
Right.
What might be a source of pride for one could be a source of resentment for another.
And those different perspectives can coexist even within the same family.
Yeah.
It's what makes family dynamics so fascinating and often so difficult to understand.
From the outside looking in,
From the outside looking in,
we keep coming back to this idea of complexity.
yeah, we do.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines of simplified narratives.
Right.
But when you really delve into a life like Debbie Nelson's, you realize there's so much more beneath the surface.
And I think that's the power of these deep dives.
Yeah.
They challenge us to look beyond the obvious, to embrace the nuances,
Yeah.
and to resist the urge to judge or categorize people
Based on limited information.
based on limited information.
It's a reminder that every life is this tapestry woven from countless threads.
Yeah.
Joy, sorrow, triumph, heartbreak.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those threads get tangled, they knot up, but they're all part of the same fabric.
Beautifully put.
Thanks.
It makes me wonder what threads stand out most to you
Well, that's a good question.
as we reflect on her life and legacy.
Yeah. It's a tough question, but one that's worth pondering.
Yeah.
For me, it's the thread of resilience.
Okay.
To face the challenges she did, both personal and public.
Right.
It speaks to an inner strength that I find incredibly admirable.
Yeah.
And also the thread of motherhood.
Okay.
Even amidst the conflict with Eminem, there were these moments of pride, moments that suggest a bond that, however strained, couldn't be completely severed.
Those are powerful threads indeed.
Yeah.
And I think they lead us to a larger question.
Okay.
How do we reconcile the complexities of a person's life with the simplified narratives that often surround them, especially when fame is involved?
It's something to keep in mind, not just for this case, but for all the stories we encounter. The lives we try to understand.
Absolutely.
That's a great point to leave our listeners with.
Yeah.
We've explored the highs and lows, the love and the pain that shaped Debbie Nelson's journey.
We've
grappled with the messy reality of family dynamics amplified by the spotlight. But more importantly, we've attempted to do it with empathy.
Yes.
Recognizing that behind the headlines, behind the music, behind the public persona, lies a complex human story worthy of our consideration.
Well said.
And I think that's a fitting note to end on. As we've been talking about Debbie Nelson's life, one thing that keeps coming up for me is how intertwined her story is with Eminem's career.
Right.
It's almost like you can't talk about one without the other.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about family legacies in general, especially when fame and public scrutiny are a part of it all.
It's interesting, right, how much of our own life's direction is influenced by the choices our family makes. And when those choices lead to some sort of success or notoriety, how do we even carve out our own identity?
Right. Debbie Nelson was more than just Eminem's mom.
Right.
But that label became a huge part of her story.
It did.
And I wonder, did she embrace that or did she feel trapped by it?
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that fame has this reach.
It does.
And it's not always easy to step outside of its shadow.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about all the assumptions we make, too.
No, I'm totally.
About those connected to famous people.
Right.
Do we hold them to a different standard? Do we expect them to answer for things their family did?
Right. It feels unfair to judge someone just because of their family.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to approach these situations with empathy.
Absolutely.
And recognize that everyone, regardless of their family, deserves respect and understanding.
I think this deep dive has been a good example of that, practicing that empathy. We've worked hard to look beyond the surface, beyond the headlines and the tabloids.
Yeah, to see her as a complex individual.
Right, with her own experiences, struggles, aspirations.
It's a reminder that even those who seem to have it all, the wealth, the fame, the talent, they still face the same challenges and heartbreaks that we all do.
That's what connects us all, right?
Yeah.
Those shared human experiences.
Whether we're the parent of a global superstar or living a quiet life.
Right. We all navigate family and the search for identity.
Yeah, the longing for connection.
Well said.
And with that in mind, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Okay.
I hope this conversation has left you with something to think about.
Me too.
Some new insights into the life of Debbie Nelson.
Yeah.
Maybe even a new perspective on family legacies, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yes, thank you.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that will spark your curiosity and broaden your understanding of the world around us.